the Blue Shoes Fitness podcast, where we talk about strength training, nutrition, faith, family, and how all of those things work together for parents like you and me. My name is Coach Jay, and today we have another Q&A episode. It's episode number 25, and every 5 episodes, I'm committing to do a Q&A episode with all of your questions. So let's get right into it. We're covering topics like fast versus slow weight loss, things I've changed my mind on as a coach, home gym setups, and so much more. So let's kick things off with our verse of the week. We are hitting up Joshua 1:9, and this might be a familiar verse if you are familiar with the Bible at all. This is Joshua 1:9. It says, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." And this is a very tattooable, very coffee mug worthy, t-shirt worthy, daily journal planner worthy sort of verse that you see all over, especially just the tagline of "be strong and courageous." You see that a lot throughout the book of Joshua. But I wanted to bring this up just as a quick reminder with the context that this was given. And this is in the first chapter of the book of Joshua, which comes right after the book of Deuteronomy. And in the final chapter, in the final lines of Deuteronomy, Moses, the main character up to this point, has died. He died right in the last chapter, did not get to go into the promised land, and now Joshua is taking over, and he is being reminded many, many times over by the Lord that he ought to be strong and courageous, and not by his own will, not by just, it's not God encouraging him as a cheerleader saying, "You can do it." He is saying, essentially, "You can't do it, but you can do it with me because I, being the Lord your God, will be with you wherever you go." And man, I think that that is just so good for where we are today, in that you see verses like this just pulled out of context all the time of and applied in kind of this self-help sort of way, and that is not the context at all of where this comes from. Joshua had every reason to be afraid and discouraged on his own accord, but God was with him because he was working within the will of God. And I think that's really good for us today too, that we must be within God's will in order to receive this blessing of God being with us, and in order to see that strength and courage that is not from ourselves. So that is what I have for you encouragement wise from the book of Joshua. I hope that that blesses you this week. All right, Q&A time. We have 10 or so questions that we're going to be hitting up. The very first one being, is it better to make more progress faster or to go slower for longer? So this is maybe going to be dependent, and man, I'm already starting off. Question number 1 already saying it depends. It of course it's going to be dependent on a lot of things. The biggest thing maybe being progress. Across what metric are we looking at progress wise? This could be in the case of fat loss. This could be in the case of building muscle or building strength or injury recovery. I mean, progress looks very different for many different people across many different goals. But let's just take a common example of something like fat loss, and maybe that was where this question came from. Is it better to essentially to lose weight faster or to go more slowly but do it for longer? And from my own experience, from what I've read in the research, from what I've read across just many testimonials as well, is that this is going to be very case dependent. And that's going to be very dependent on a lot of things, not the least of them being your personality and how you are feeling at any given moment along your fitness journey. Part of that being with something like losing weight is recognizing that if you go faster, it will be more intense right from the beginning, meaning that you will need to make bigger sacrifices right away, as opposed to being able to make smaller sacrifices sustained out for a longer period of time. And in hearing those two ends of that spectrum laid out like that, you might already be having somewhat of a visceral reaction of going, "Oh yeah, no, I would definitely rather do one way versus the other." And that's really astute to be able to recognize that. A lot of the times people aren't able to identify that when it comes to, I really didn't think about the fact that I might have a choice at my rate of progress, depending on what kind of sacrifices I want to make, what kind of commitment and consistency I'm willing to put forward. So that's a big deal right then and there. And as a coach, that's part of what I help my clients do, is not only to assess those things from a surface level, but to also help my clients recognize that sometimes their initial evaluation of themselves isn't always as accurate as they had thought. They might say, "Oh yeah, no, I definitely am I want fast progress right away. I'm going to do whatever it takes." And then we start off on that journey and a few weeks in they're like, "Yeah, no, I am not as hardcore, quote unquote, as I had thought, and a lot of times faster progress sort of gets glorified across social media, and so I think it's worth recognizing that it doesn't have to be that way, and it's a very humbling experience for a lot of people when they recognize that going slower for longer might actually be a better approach. That being said, I have encouraged clients who are in a position in their season of life where they're able to be at a higher commitment and consistency level, that it might be worth pushing a little harder in some of those times and kind of going with the ebb and flow of your everyday life and the different seasons of life that you might be going through. Where if you're at a point where you can really commit yourself to it, it might be worth pushing during that time so that you can ease up on the gas when you need to. So, just some thoughts on that. It's certainly not better to do one or another, but it might be better for you at different points in your life. And depending on what your goals are, too, there's not going to largely be for something like body composition wise, there's really not going to be a huge benefit of going faster versus slower. It's just really a matter of intensity versus your timeline. Question two: besides just adding weight to an exercise, how else can I progress it? Awesome question with an awesome implication right off the bat is that the way that you think of progressing your exercises, the primary way a lot of the times is just adding weight. Just put more weight on the bar. And that's kind of the expression, even if you're not using a barbell. It's just you're always adding weight and you're trying to add 5 pounds here. You're trying to add 5% of the weight here. And that can be a great way when you are looking at trying to progress in terms of strength, in terms of hypertrophy goals. And all of that is awesome. However, you will recognize very quickly that if you go at it with this mindset of, oh, every workout or every week or every month, I'm going to try to add 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 15 pounds, whatever it is, that's going to be pretty unsustainable. Think about if you tried adding 10 pounds to your squat and you did that. If you set out to do that every single week, that would mean by the time that you got to the end of 1 year that you would have added 500 pounds to your squat. Does that sound doable for most of us? Absolutely not. A 500-pound squat at all is an amazing squat, much less adding 500 to whatever it is that you're squatting. So you can see that you very quickly run into an issue if that is the only metric by which you're measuring progress. And so, how else can we progress it? Well, the number one thing that I'll recommend right off the bat that might be a little bit underrated is improving your form. Is form and technique improvements is a fantastic way to progress. This is why you will hear me harp about two things over and over and over for my clients and for those of you listening to this here is taking progress photos when you have body composition goals and taking form videos when you have strength and hypertrophy related goals. So one of it is going to be kind of body composition visual changes, but then the other one, the second part that I want to mention here is that taking those form check videos of yourself, just taking a quick little 30-second video of one set of a particular exercise that you're trying to progress, that can tell you so much more than just trying to assess your own form through your own eyes during the lift itself. You can check out that video and go, hey, this felt very different than it looked. And maybe in a good way, maybe in a bad way, maybe just in a different way. But having that extra information, that is a great way to then go, okay, on this next set of this exercise or the next time that I do this exercise, I'm going to try to adjust my form in this way. And you can see if that improves the amount of weight that you're able to lift. Maybe it decreases it too. A lot of times you might realize that, oh, I've been kind of cheating my form a little bit more drastically than I had thought. And taking a video, the video will not lie to you. So that is a great way to progress your any individual exercises by improving your technique. You can always add more reps too, and of course, there are caps to most of these metrics of you're not always going to be able to add more weight. You're not always going to be able to, or it's not always going to be a great idea to add repetitions. You're not going to be wanting to do sets of 80 reps at a time. Uh, Same thing with the weight. You're probably not going to be wanting to add 5 reps every single workout or every week that you're doing this. But if you are stuck at a certain weight where if you are unable to add weight because of the equipment that you have available to you, or if for example, if you're trying to progress from 15-pound dumbbells to 20-pound dumbbells, I mean, that's a 30 something percent increase in weight. That's a pretty big jump, even though it may only be 5 pounds, it's still a pretty big jump. And so you're looking at going, okay, what can I do with these 15-pound dumbbells? Well, if you are lifting those in whatever exercise it is for 10 reps, maybe try to shoot for 11, maybe 12, and see what you can do with that. And then by the time that you cap out at being able to lift that weight for a certain amount of reps, maybe that's when you then progress by way of dropping the reps and increasing the weight. So there are a lot of different ways that these variables play out with one another too, but you can always add more repetitions to an exercise. You can add more sets to an exercise. So across my group training program, Strong Shepherds, you'll see that across each mesocycle or across each training block, the number of sets will increase from one week to the next. We start off with two and we'll progress all the way up to three or four, depending on the exercise. And so adding in more volume by way of adding in more and harder sets, that can be a really great way to progress. You can also, this might be another underrated one that I'll end with here, is that you can also choose harder variations of exercises as well. Again, this is a really great way to be able to progress by way of if you feel like you're limited with the equipment that you have, whether you're working out at home or even if it's just a busy day at the gym and you're not sure that you're going to be able to snag the next size up on dumbbells or whatever the situation might be, is that you can always choose more challenging variations of an exercise. So, for example, something like a split squat, if you are using a certain amount of weight and that starts to get easy or you want to progress it, instead of picking up the next heavier weight, maybe try something like a rear foot elevated split squat or a Bulgarian split squat. Those are interchangeable to where you're might be using the same weight, but you're now using a more challenging variation and that weight is going to feel more challenging. It's going to feel heavier in essence too. So that might be one way to go about that too. Number three, what is a good rate of weight loss in a diet phase? I'm not sure if I'm going too slow or not. So, this is where the coach in me immediately sees that last part of going, I'm not sure if I'm going too slow or not. There is no such thing as going too slow or too fast from an objective level. There's no way of quantifying what too slow or too fast looks like. And so I wouldn't worry about that. A lot of the times that sort of mentality comes from a comparison point of view of seeing what other people are experiencing in their weight loss journey. For example, if you see somebody seems to be losing 2, 3, 4 pounds a week, you might be wondering, oh, if I'm losing 1 pound a week, am I going too slow? Is that good? Or maybe you're on the opposite side. Maybe you see people typically losing a half pound or a pound a week, and you're going much faster than that. And you go, am I going too fast? Is this bad? There's probably not a significant risk in either one of those scenarios if your protein intake is adequate and if your strength training is at adequate intensity, and that gets kind of off into the weeds on that. But from a strictly from a rate of weight loss, you don't have to worry about going too fast or too slow. If you are curious about what is a very popular approach and a very realistic one, you can think of the often cited losing 1% of your body weight per week, or that, maybe around 1 pound per week. Of course, that math is going to tease out differently depending on how much you currently weigh. But whatever one of those metrics is either easier for you to conceptualize, or which one feels more applicable to your situation. If you weigh 100 pounds, if you're losing, 1 pound per week, you won't be able to keep up that rate for very long. Whereas if you weigh 300 pounds, losing 1 pound per week, you might be able to go a little bit faster than that because 1% of your body weight would be 3 pounds or so. And again, you won't be able to keep that rate up for maybe the entirety of your diet phase, but those numbers can give you an idea of how to somewhat reverse engineer. Okay, if I want to lose about this much weight per week, what might that look like in terms of my calorie deficit? And so reverse engineering that can be a really, I would say, interesting starting point, more so than a helpful starting point. It can be helpful if that leads you to making sustainable choices, that go beyond that are going to be sustainable for the length of your diet phase. But it's definitely interesting to see, okay, here's what might be possible or practical. And let's take a look at how that plays out in reality with your everyday life, with your schedule, with your commitments, with your commitment level to the program. All of those kinds of things play into a role to where it's not really that helpful to go, I need to lose this much weight per week, or thinking about going too fast or too slow. So something like 1% body weight per week loss, or around a pound or so a week, that can be an excellent place to well, to start, but even just to assess your progress too. That can be that is amazing progress if you're losing a pound a week. That's 4 pounds a month, and if you continue down that, you can see how that might extrapolate out over the course of multiple months or even a year. So that's a big deal. Number four, you seem to promote full body workouts. Is there a main reason? Nice. Are there any other good ways to divide workouts? Totally. There are lots of good ways to divide workouts. And I guess I haven't really thought about this specifically. I don't know that I would say I specifically promote full body workouts, though in my group training program, that's what we primarily do. And yes, there is a main reason for that, and that being it's mostly a practical reasoning. There are many, if you want to call it effective workout splits. That's what we're talking about here of dividing out your workouts, of how you split them up across the course of a week. There are many ways of being able to do that that are going to meet all of your physiological needs as far as meeting minimum training volume requirements across different muscle groups and things like that. But that's just half the equation and maybe even less than that. The other part of the equation is the practical side of it doesn't matter how good your training split is if you can't stick to it in reality. And so the practical side of why I tend to use a lot of full body workouts for myself and for my clients is schedule wise is a big one where if you think about I would say most of my clients work out between 3 and 4 times a week, which is on the lower end compared to what you might see on a lot of, social media of people writing out 5 and 6 day plans and 5 and 6 day splits. And this is 3 to 4 workouts. So we look at how can we best split up your training volume over the course of these workouts. And that's again kind of twofold. We want to make sure that we're hitting enough training volume to stimulate whatever adaptations we're looking at for each muscle group. But we also want to take into account the practical sides of, well, what if you miss a workout? If you have a 3 day workout schedule and you're doing a push pull leg split, for example, if you miss one of those workouts, all of a sudden you have now missed an entire group of muscles. You've missed an entire set of movement patterns that you now have to wait till the next week in order to do. And so if you do something like full body workouts, while you might, if you miss a workout, you might be getting less training volume than you had intended on, you will still likely hit all or at least most muscle groups that you had intended for over the course of that week. And training volume, I've talked about this in a couple episodes, but it does not need to be as high as a lot of people think of spending hours and hours in the gym and doing, German volume training of 10 sets of 10 or anything like that. It doesn't need to be all that high, whereas you can achieve high intensity without a ton of extra volume, which means that you might be able to achieve higher intensity without spending lots of extra time in there. And so something like full body workouts, if you're doing even if it's not even a full body, even if it's just a smaller split than the number of workouts that you have. So, for example, if you are looking at working out 3 times a week, even if you did an upper lower split, even if you missed one workout during that week, you would still have hit all of your muscle groups at least once. And that's a great strategy that I use for almost all of my clients. And you can take that can be your takeaway for this episode as well too, is that um, however many days that you plan on working out, maybe choose a workout split that meets all of your goals, but also meets the practical side of it of, if you plan on working out 4 days a week, maybe split up your workouts into 3 separate workouts so that you end up repeating that first workout for the last part of the week. And then you kind of just cycle through like that. That might be a good way of going about doing it. So that's why you see me doing a lot of full body workouts and why you'll see that in my group programs and one-on-one clients as well. Number five, what is something that you've changed your mind about in fitness, health, or coaching journey? What about parenting? Okay, so I wrote out a couple notes on these here because I thought that this was worth diving into a little bit, and I have a quick answer for each of those 1, 2, 3, 4 sections here. So, what have I changed my mind about in terms of fitness? I would say that something that I used to be really big on, and this is circumstantial, but is something that I've realized now in my own coaching journey is that free weights are super overrated. And what I mean by free weights is dumbbells and barbell training. I think it is super overrated for most people's goals. They are, I'll caveat this here, That's the clickbaity version of it. But what I really mean is that I used to think that free weights, that using barbells, using dumbbells, that was somehow inherently better than other options, than using machines, than using cables, than using even your body weight for certain exercises, things like that. Uh, what I've realized is that a lot of people only have access to free weights, and you can get amazing results with dumbbells and barbells, and you can get just as good results with those as other implementations, but they're not inherently better. And I come from a fitness background of I was, got into this at the time where I thought that machines were for beginners only, or that machines were somehow cheating because they did all the stabilizing for you and all of that. Which now recognizing for strength and hypertrophy goals, that is kind of the name of the game. You want to find as much stability as you can in most of the time, and that way you can apply as much force output as you can in the intended direction across the intended muscle groups that you're looking at, rather than trying to spend lots of your energy stabilizing everything. So I think that free weights are very overrated now. If you are, I've seen a number of people talk about this, where if you have options of doing a certain exercise with dumbbells versus a cable machine. I've seen lots of videos of people doing a dumbbell exercise and they're standing right in front of a $10,000 cable machine that might even do a better job of what they're trying to do. That's something that has really resonated with me from the fitness side. From a health side of it, another uh, over underrated sort of thing is I used to think that sleep is super overrated. One of my mantras used to be that just sleep is it's boring, and I sleep so I can wake up and get on with the rest of the day. And I have recognized that sleep and kind of that sister conversation of talking about stress. Sleep and stress kind of go together a lot in how we talk about that in coaching. That sleep is definitely not overrated. And especially as a parent now, maybe that's when that switch happened. As a parent now, I recognize that it is worth getting as much sleep as you can and as good quality sleep as you can too. And from the stress side of things too, of it is worth attacking whatever stressors you have in your life and addressing those, as opposed to just letting them kind of fester. I'm a pretty low stress person. And so when those stressors do come about, it's easy enough to just kind of try to brush them off. But I've learned that's worth dealing with those as opposed to just letting them kind of, yeah, fester behind the scenes. From a coaching point of view, oh my goodness. The very first thing that came to mind was talking about how I used to think that SMART goals were the law of the land. And if you're not familiar with that, this is how, from an academic point of view, of I went to school for exercise science, and we were taught essentially that the law of the land for clients was to set SMART goals, which this differs across, depending on who you learned it from. But for us, it was specific goals, measurable goals, attainable goals, realistic goals, and time bound or timely goals. And basically, all of this is a way of helping your clients to create a very specific goal that they can measure, that's realistic for them, and giving, setting some kind of a deadline or a timeline for it. And that can work. That can be a really great option depending on the client, depending on the goal. But I have since learned that that is not only not the law of the land, you don't have to do that, but that a lot of people are maybe even better off not being so specific on all of those kinds of things. They don't have to have a deadline for their goals. It's good to set, check marks along the way, but you don't have to say we need to reach this goal by this point and then reverse engineer that to go, okay, what does that mean in terms of how much weight we have to lose, how much strength we have to gain, how much muscle we have to build, things like that. That ends up not playing out in reality very well. Our classes, literally, we were handed case studies where it's here's this person, here's how old they are, here are their goals, here are here's their health history, here are some practical implications in their life. Now write a program for them. And it was like writing programs for robots, whereas people, real parents are not robots. And you, as a parent, probably know that very well, that your goals, your timeline, your all of that just feels like a big jumbled mess in your head. And it is not worth stressing over trying to set SMART goals if that feels like it's really against the grain of what it is that you're trying to achieve. From a parenting side, I have recognized by way of a single book that's called Parenting by Paul David Tripp. I want to buy that for every parent at every baby shower ever. Is that we are much more like our kids than we think we are, or than we want to think that we are. We deal with the exact same issues of sin and temptation, and it just manifests in different ways. But we're in the very same boat that they are, and that really changes how we ought to deal with our kids in disciplining them, in praising them, and encouraging them, all of that too. So we'll talk about that later at another point, but there's some thoughts on that. All right, number 6. Let's cruise through these on high rep sets. I get out of breath before my muscles get tired. What should I do? Ah, yes, endurance. So, uh, there are a number of different ways you can handle this. One of them being is that this usually happens for people on lower body exercises or exercises that are very systemic in nature. Things like squats, things like lunges, things like deadlifts, where you are really you're working across your body. You might be targeting your legs in a squat, but really you are using all of your lower and upper back muscles to maintain your torso posture. You are maybe holding your breath at different points. And so this might be an option to prioritize lower rep sets, especially on these lower body exercises. So maybe if you're doing sets of 20 squats or sets of 20 lunges, you will likely get out of breath no matter what. So maybe drop those reps down to more manageable range, and that might help you on your cardiovascular side of those too. So it's not the limiting factor. You can also pay attention to your breathing patterns. This is something that I encourage my clients to do, and uh, there are many different ways of doing this. Of you can breathe on every rep, you can breathe out on your concentric portion of each rep. You can breathe on every other repetition. You can set it up however you want, but even just paying attention to it again by taking something like a form check video, that can really tell you a lot about. Oh, I had no idea that I was holding my breath for 5 straight reps. Maybe that's why I feel like I'm out of breath because I'm literally holding my breath for half the set. That might be a good place to start, and you'll just get better over time at this too. Your endurance will improve to some degree just by way of doing these things too. So, if the nature of the beast is not that you can just lower your reps, then you might just get better over time. All right, number 7. Help me justify starting my home gym. Needing to pull the trigger with the smiley, winky face with the tongue sticking out. Yes. Okay. I'm going to tell you straight up that financially, it absolutely does not make sense to start a home gym. If you do the whole math of, oh, if I'm going to pay $20 a month at a gym and instead of putting, what is that, $240 a year, if I just save that up over the course of 10 years, then I could, get $2,000 worth of gym equipment. And that's not going to go very far in a gym setting or in a home gym setting. And so I would say don't go for those reasons there. Sometimes you'll see that math be advertised like that, and that's no good. I would say that for me, having a home gym is super super convenient on days when I'm unable to get to the gym, or even just when it feels like I can't really justify going to the gym because it's going to be a short workout and the drive is going to be longer than the actual workout itself. That might be a reason to consider a home gym. Um, and you'll need to also kind of decide, this is my advice here, is to decide if this is going to be in addition to like a gym membership. That's how I have it, where I'll split up my workouts between home and gym workouts, or if it's going to be instead of a gym, because that might really determine what sort of equipment that you look at getting for your home gym. If you're just looking at getting some, bands and dumbbells for home, or if you want a full squat rack, functional trainer, prime prodigy rack or something like that. I mean, you can go down the rabbit hole really quickly on that and spend lots of money unnecessarily. So figuring out why you want a home gym, as far as if it's going to be in addition to the actual gym or if it's going to be in place of that, that might be a good place to start. If you want more equipment recommendations, I can definitely send you those as well. Number 8, how come you don't post anything about specific clients? Okay, this is a really great question, and I think it's maybe a little bit unfair to say that I don't post anything about them. However, rather than defending myself, I will say that this is absolutely something that I want to get better at. That being said, a lot of the times my client wins are more strength based or emotional based or mentality based or knowledge based. Some of my clients do come for weight loss reasons, but a lot of times it's from a mentality and a wanting to learn more, wanting to get better at their technique, wanting to get stronger, things like that. And so those tend not to show up as well as before and after pictures, so to speak. And so that's something that is um, uh, worth considering as far as when I'm sharing about what my clients are going through too. But I do talk a lot about my clients, maybe not on social media, but for my email list, a lot of times I'll share about some client wins on there as well too. All right, and let's. Oh man, I'm out of time here. All right. Well, we'll cover some of these other questions in another Q&A here too. I'll leave you with all of this here. Thanks for hanging out with me on today's Q&A episode. These are super fun for me. So if you've enjoyed this episode, take a screenshot, post it to your favorite social media. And yeah, I'll leave you with that. I'm Coach Jay. Thanks for hanging with me, and we'll see you next time.